Hello, Mr. Manville. We're interviewing you for our video project about the veterans, about what's happening, what happened, and get to know you a little bit more, so your story could live on with everyone, because
Okay.
people want to know.
Sounds good.
We're gonna ask you some life stuff.
Yeah.
Where were you born?
I was born in Hayward, California, 1980.
Who were your parents, and what were your occupations? Occupations.
Occupations? Well, my dad's name was Darby, Darby Manville, and my mom's maiden name was Donna Webster. They're both still alive. Dad lives in Iowa, Mom lives here in Porterville. Throughout my life, I was actually raised by my grandmother. Her name was Peggy Manville. She passed away in 2012. After I was born in Hayward, I grew up in Fremont. Went to high school at John F. Kennedy High School. Lived quite a bit of some life before I joined the military. I was 24 when I joined. So I was real late in comparison to a lot of older folks that were like drafted and whatnot. But before that, like, I went to automotive school to be a mechanic, which ultimately turned out to be a big, huge flop. I was working as a tire buster for America's Tire Company. My first job was at See's Candies in Newark, California, right? I was a stock boy. They wouldn't even let me out of the back to be in the front. And they even told me you could eat as much candy as you want, and that wasn't okay for a fat kid. I learned what my favorites were. My second job, I was a busboy at Red Robin at the New Park Mall. You guys have heard of Red Robin, right? Yeah? Okay, good. After that, I was what was my third job? Okay, so I was a tow truck driver. I was a repo man. I've been shot at doing that. Downtown Oakland, because I grew up out there in the Bay Area and just driving through trailer parks, and they hear the truck coming and the whole complex residents coming out just mad with sticks and bats, because you're gonna come take their car. And then finally I just decided life was not going the route that I wanted to go, and by that time I had already had 2 kids and I wasn't married. Those were my oldest children, David and Rihanna. So I tried. I kind of always had this call to service, I wanted to do something. Nobody in my family was ever in the military, and I didn't think that they would let me in, honestly, because in 2003, I was diagnosed with Wolff-Parkinson's White disorder, which is a heart condition, and I had heart surgery. But they didn't do open heart surgery. They went through my arteries and my groin. You're welcome. And it was corrected. It was just like a little birth defect. I was born with this second electrical impulse in my heart that I guess if they went offset, if they were timed just right, it was good. But if they went offset, it could just stop my heart. And so I lived 23 years before they found out I had that. And so I still tried to join the military. And at first I tried to join the Army, and the Army said no. The Army said I had too many tattoos, and I had children and I wasn't married, so if I deployed, who was going to watch my kids, something like that. No, I tried to do it in the Air Force first. That's what they said. And the Army said the same thing. I guess they had the same accepting criteria. And so I didn't give up. I went to the Navy recruiter and I told them my situation, and they were like, yeah, all right, cool, we'll just sign a waiver. I was too tall, I had too many tattoos, I had kids and I wasn't married. I didn't tell them anything about the heart surgery, and if anybody gets this video and you try to, I'm already out, I got an honorable discharge, so you can't do anything to me now. So yeah, the Navy took me, and it was weird too because I was smoking cigarettes at the time, and I knew that boot camp was heading, it was coming up, I'm like, oh boy, they're gonna do a lot of running and exercising. So I put on my sweatpants and put on a t-shirt, and I'm like, I'm gonna go for a run. So So I remember leaving my grandma's house, and I got to the sidewalk, and I said, okay, I'm going to run around the block 3 times. I ran to the end of the street, pretty much fell on the neighbor's lawn, lit up another cigarette and said, this is not for me. But my whole life, I've always just gave up on everything. You know what I mean? Up until then. And so I don't know what happened. I still got on that plane, flew to Chicago, went to the USO. Oh, by the way, I was in the Navy. Yeah, okay, did I mention that? Oh, yeah. Got to Chicago, sat at the USO office, and then I was like, everybody was talking about like, oh my God, what's it going to be like? And I'm just like the oldest one there, 24 years old. Everybody else is like, I even had a 17-year-old there. But the guy couldn't even grow a mustache yet. Well, they came for us. They put me on a bus and drove me to Great Lakes, Illinois. And I'll never forget getting off that bus. I had never been yelled at so much in my life. I mean, at the time, I was like 6'5", 200 pounds, you know what I mean? And this little guy, you know, and dressed in khakis was barking at me, and they got mad at my shirt that I was wearing. Like, I guess they didn't like what it said, and so they made me go in the bathroom and take it off, flip it inside out, and put it back on, and they kept telling me, well, after you get medically cleared, we're going to make you do a bunch of work and stuff, and I'm like, oh, super. But you know what? They shaved my head. They made me put on blue sweatpants. They put masking tape across my chest. It said Manville D. You know what I mean? Talk about taking a person and knocking them down to the bare nothing of what you've ever been taught your entire life, and now they're going to revamp your whole way of thinking, which is not what I expected. But that's how I got into the Navy. And later on, after your questions, I'll go into more detail. But I don't want to jump too far ahead as far as your next question, so go ahead.
Do you have any siblings?
I have 2 half-sisters.
Did any of them join the military?
No. Mm-mm.
How did they feel about you joining the service when you were going to boot camp?
Honestly, me and my sisters were never really that close. We didn't live together. My older sister always lived like 2 blocks away, because when my mom and dad split up, I went with my dad's mom, and she went with my mom's mom. So she kind of went with the money, and I kind of went with the love. You know what I mean? We always saw each other, but yeah, when I left, there really wasn't a big support. My grandma was like, cool, you know, you're going to go and do something with your life, you know, and she was very supportive, but she was also more like my mother than anything else. So.
Any primary or secondary schools that you attend, like high school, elementary school? Where did you attend?
Oh, elementary school was Briar Elementary in Fremont, California. Junior high was Walters Warriors, 7th and 8th grade, Fremont, and then John F. Kennedy for high school. And then I attended Sequoia Institute of Technology for trade college, biggest mistake of my life. Then I ended up doing some college in the service through Central Texas College out of Killeen, Texas, and then Porterville College here.
Which branch did you enter?
U.S. Navy in 2004, June 7th.
Thank you. Sorry. What is your most vivid memory of your time in training or in school or over there?
Well, my most fondest memory in basic training was a good segue into where I left off with me going into when I got into boot camp. And I told you that they couldn't wait to start working us out to see what we were made of. And I was honestly not showing up, but super nervous. But the day that we got medically cleared, it was like, okay, they took us to the grinder and they said, okay, we're going to run. And remember, I told you about my first attempt at running before I left for boot camp, right? I had never been more afraid of anything in my life because I know I'm probably going to be last. I know that everybody else is going to be faster than me. I know that everybody's going to have a faster time because I wasn't the oldest, but there was a guy that was like 34. He got a waiver. He was like the oldest you could possibly be to join the military, or at least the Navy. but he was small and skinny, and I knew that he was going to, anyway. So we started running. I'm like, okay, I'm give it my best. And remember, I'm not smoking anymore, but it's only been like 3 days. So everything's still fresh in my lungs. And so we're running, right? And they're saying, just don't stop running. Just don't stop. Just keep moving your feet. Do not walk, right? And then I'm looking, I'm like, I'm not last. There's like 2 people behind me. I'm like, sweet. And so I'm going, and I don't realize, I don't know where we're going. I've never done this before. And I just kept going, and they're just like, they kept saying, don't stop, keep running, don't walk, whatever you do, just keep moving your feet. And all of a sudden we stopped. And the RDC, which is a recruit division commander, whatever, he said, congratulations, y'all just ran 11 miles. Yeah, right. You know, it's amazing what your body can do when you don't think it can do it. If somebody's just keeping your mind going on something else other than running, or just focusing on something, and you just don't walk. And it's like I was associating that with, like, okay, all I have to do is not walk. You know, it doesn't matter how slow I'm going as long as I'm going. 11 miles, first time, from literally going to the end of my street and dying on the grass, and then coming back to life, and going to boot camp, and then running 11 miles.
Would you recall that as being your worst or your best memory?
Honestly, it's a mixture of both. I had so much internal pride in what I had just accomplished, and I knew that by doing that they really couldn't throw anything at me that I couldn't handle.
So after like basic training, what's your first task in the Navy?
Well, I'm 6'6", and I pretty much was that at the time. And it just so happened in 2004 in Great Lakes Division 265, they were recruiting from Washington, D.C. for the Presidential Ceremonial Guard. They looked at me and they said, oh, you fit the profile. Like, you know, you're tall, you're going to look good on camera. You know, everybody told me I look just like the Lone Sailor statue. If you don't know what that is, look it up. He's a tall guy wearing his pea coat with a sea bag sitting next to him and his Dixie cup cocked to the side. But they said all these cool things, right? They're like, yeah, you join the ceremonial guard. You come with us. We'll send you home for 2 weeks after boot camp, and you can be all like, yeah, what's up, girl? And, you know, not go straight to A school and come to D.C. and, you know, do ceremonies under the president. You could be a casket bearer. You could be color guard. You could be drill team. You could be fire party. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. So I went home for 2 weeks, and I'm all, family's cool. I'm like, my little butter bar, or my little McDonald's ribbon, they call it, your national defense ribbon, the one you get when you're like joined during like some type of wartime. It's all I had, and I was all in whites, and my Dixie cup, and I was a little bit skinnier. And I was like, okay, it's time for me to go to D.C. You know, I've never been to D.C. before. Never thought I'd ever go to D.C. And it was not fun. It was like another 2 months of boot camp. They shaved my head again. They put sweats back on me, even to the point of putting masking tape on my chest again with my last name. And the training consisted of standing in one spot in a garage and staring at a dot on the wall for 4 hours without moving. You know, and you see guys like doing a tornado. They're standing up and they're just like moving like this because you're losing like your equilibrium just by staring at a dot on the wall. And it's because that's pretty much what you do, is you stand still and you look really good in front of like presidential ceremonies and whatnot. But that was my first duty station.
When you're in boot camp, is there any instructor that like comes to mind?
Yes. I don't remember his name, but he was a chief, and he was kind of like oversaw my division. He was like the head guy for my boot camp squad. He was very mean. He would make us do bunk and locker drills for hours, to the point to where everybody on the dang division had bloody knuckles from tucking their sheets in and rubbing it on the rack. And so he got in trouble. The captain came in and brought people in and took pictures of all of our bloody knuckles. and he was no longer in charge of us. I don't know where they put him. I mean, to get rid of a chief, it takes an act of Congress. And he wasn't a bad guy. He just overdid it that day. But that was probably, and I was the master at arms for my boot camp division, so I was like the division cop. Like most branches have an MP, in the Navy it's called the MA, master at arms.
Just in charge of everyone?
You're just in charge of like enforcing the rules. Yeah, I was like, the recruit cop, like stop doing that, go clean the head. And also graduating boot camp, when they take the recruit hat off and they put the one that says Navy on it, it was like, I'll never forget it.
Best moment of your life?
No, that wasn't the best. For boot camp it was, yeah. I mean, it set me off on that tone of like, I told you, like my whole life I never really completed anything. And this one I actually saw through and I didn't give up and I made it, which set the tone for me now.
So telling us that you went doing the coat of arms, right? The coat of arms when you're standing there doing the ceremonies.
Yeah.
Did you qualify for any equipment like vehicles, aircraft in the Navy?
Not yet.
Weapons?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, I haven't got there yet. It gets a lot more interesting, I promise. So interesting enough is that when I got to D.C. for the Presidential Ceremonial Guard, it's like every time the president was out, it was during George Bush II. I was there for his inauguration, did 2 State of the Union addresses, assisted in 250 ceremonies at Arlington National Cemetery, President Reagan's burial. Not sure if you guys remember that, but I was actually received a flag letter from an admiral for assisting with the security for the inauguration of President Bush. I also did port operations for Naval District Washington around the same time, where I did emergency evacuation for the Pentagon and oil spill response for the nation's capital region through the Anacostia River, which is a branch off the Potomac. So I learned a lot of stuff while I was out there, other than shining brass, creasing pants, wearing Dickies, leggings, the lace-up stuff, and wearing taps on your shoes so that when you march, after that duty station, I got orders to the fleet. So if you have a question in the future that'll lead to that, I'll be happy to tell you.
Did you receive any promotions?
Oh, yeah. A lot, actually. I actually got ranked up pretty quick. I was 24 years old and an E1, slick sleeve. I had nothing. I was so embarrassing. Like these 18-year-old kids, they got their friend to join. Like I didn't know anybody that was 24 years old that wanted to go in the military. My buddy Mike Ziegler ended up going in the Army like when he was 18, and we were supposed to go together. But then I ended up having a kid, and so I waited. But he went. He hated it. But I went from E1 to E2 and then E3 really quick. Everybody does. I don't care what branch you're in. E1 through E3 is pretty much you complete some paperwork and you get it, But when I was in D.C., I made E4. That was the first rank of NCO, non-commissioned officer, where you start kind of having more responsibility. And that's, I didn't tell you, but I joined the Navy to be an engineman. It's COG is the sign, and it's basically working on diesel engines. Little did I know that there was going to be a lot more collateral duties than just working on diesel engines. But because I went to the ceremonial guard, that put everything on hold. But in the guard, no, I really wasn't certified in much other than standing still and looking sharp. But after my time was up at the guard, they sent me to C School, which was LSD 41 PropTech C School back in Great Lakes, Illinois.
What was the easiest and the hardest part about adapting to the military lifestyle?
The hardest part was everything. They re-taught me how to brush my teeth. You have to do it a certain way. You are reprogrammed. How you fold your clothes. There's a method to do it. Everything has to fit in your rack on a ship. So even in boot camp, they teach you how to fold your shirts, where to put them, roll your socks to where they have a little smiley face, and they go here. You know, it's 24 years of life. You get accustomed to how you do things, and then all of a sudden you know, it's all changed. The easiest thing was nothing. Nothing was easy. Never getting to sleep wasn't easy. What was easy was them telling you you can go home. It was easy to get on that plane.
Where did you serve when you were in the Navy?
Washington, D.C., and then I went to Naval Amphibious Base Little Creek in Virginia Beach, Virginia. When I joined the military, they asked me, where do I want to be stationed at? And I said, San Diego, Bremerton, Washington, or Hawaii. I was from California, you know what I mean? And they sent me to the East Coast, and I'm like, well, heck, man. If I would have just put everything on the East Coast, would you have kept me here on the West Coast, for crying out loud? You know, and so they sent me to D.C., and then they put me in Virginia Beach. You know, Virginia Beach wasn't bad, but it wasn't home. But it was cool. Norfolk Naval Base is a couple miles north of Virginia Beach. It's like the largest naval station in the world. You go to Norfolk and you just drive over the highway and see all those destroyers and cruisers and aircraft carriers. It's like this massive site of just machinery. And then I go to my ship, right, and I'm like, oh. I was stationed on the USS Whidbey Island, LSD-41, first in her class, first always. And that motto is because that is the first ship that was made in that class in 1985 that had 4 diesel engines as main propulsion. It was 4 Colt Peel Stick PC 2.5 V16 twin turbo, 8,500 horsepower apiece on 2 shafts that equivals about 72 to 74,000 horsepower with a maximum speed of 24 knots. Put that in layman's terms, 72,000 horsepower for a maximum speed of 19 miles an hour. You're welcome. Each piston was 2.5 feet in diameter. Each cylinder head was independent, weighed about 1,600 pounds. Each exhaust valve, intake valve was like that long. Each fuel injector weighed 20 pounds. Nothing was light. Each turbo spun at about 18,000 RPMs. It ran at about 520 engine RPMs to about 165 shaft RPMs with a controllable pitch propeller. Sometimes I ask people, how does a ship go in reverse if the shafts only spin one direction? You're all smiling and laughing because you don't know. It's like, oh my God, you think, oh, I just put it in reverse, it goes backwards. No, the propeller's hydraulic, so the hub moves in and out, so the propellers change pitch, positive degree, negative degree, right? If the pitch is negative, it's going in reverse. But if the pitch is positive, it's going forward. That's how a ship goes in reverse.
Yeah. Were you in combat, like
Yes.
combat support or?
Yes, mostly combat support. This is where it kind of gets interesting. After I got to the Whidbey Island, I picked up second class petty officer. Boom, I'm an E5. I went from E1 to E5 in 2 years and 10 months as a engineman. I was originally put in M Division. We deployed for the Middle East October 1st, 2007. I guess it's now a good time to show them, huh? Oh, that's Richard over there. Good friend of mine. I'm talking to the camera. That way, maybe later in the years, they're like, who's this guy Richard? Look you up too. But this is every country I've been to on my arm. There's a lot of drinking in the Navy. I might forget. I don't know. But October 1st, 2007, I deployed to the Middle East in support of anti-piracy missions. I don't know, you guys might be a little bit too young yet to understand that in Somalia, there's no government, and these tribes in Somalia are very poor, and they figured out a pretty decent way to make some income, and that was by sending skiffs with pirates in them. Yes, I said pirates, and that's what they are, into the traffic channel off the coast of Mogadishu and along the Horn of Africa. And they would pretend like they were mariners in distress, and so they would try to get these big tankers to drop anchor. And what happens when a tanker drops anchor? it stays for a minute because you can't just pull it back up. There's a whole system of piping and fluids that need to be aligned in order to do that. The anchor windlass needs to be activated. Once that anchor is down, then they would board that ship and take it hostage until the owner of that ship or country of origin would pay the ransom that was requested, or send a team in to rescue those boats. And because I was an engineman and I worked on diesel engines, guess what kind of engines are in the small boats? Diesel engines, water jet propulsion, inline 6 Cummins turbo diesels, Caterpillar 3208s, you name it. Guess what's right on top of that engine? A 50 caliber machine gun. So if the engine's running good, guess who's in charge of that gun? That's me. We rescued 5 ships. And I remember the names. The biggest one that we were waiting about 6 months following it, they anchored it off the coast of Ale, Somalia. It was called the Golden Nori. It was a benzene tanker. And it was cool one night. You saw like a team of like Navy SEALs come on board the ship, and it's like, where did they come from? Like, that small boat would not have made it from the United States to Somalia. So it had to have been pushed out of the back of an airplane at some point with them behind it, you know, and it was really cool. And so that's the combat support was. I was part of the visit board search and seizure crew. So the Golden Nori was rescued. 1 or 2 crew of that ship had died. They were being fed bowls of rice with rocks in them. There was no sanitation facilities, and it was my job to also go on there and prepare that ship for being transferred to Saudi Arabia so it could ultimately reach its final destination of home. We also rescued 2 fishing vessels, the Mavuno 1 and the Mavuno 2. They were twin fishing vessels from Taiwan, I believe. That was the country of origin. And the Al Marjan was also another one that we rescued that was hijacked. And then there was a brand new Russian tugboat that was being transported from somewhere to somewhere that they wanted to take for hostage and ransom, you know. And that was a 7-month deployment. We deployed by ourselves. We weren't with a battle group or a amphibious strike group. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
There's more to it, but we'll go later.
After doing all that, is there, if you don't mind us asking, did that experience change you, or any wartime experience change you in the way of how you thought about like the world?
You know, I've always had a different look on life than a lot of people that I know. I've always been very humanitarian, you know what I mean? I care about people, and the consensus would tell me to say that, oh, these pirates are evil, they're bad, and they're trying to kill these people. And it's like, I mean, a good, like Captain Phillips movie, that's pretty much it. Like, that's what was going on out there. And you look at the poverty and the need to feed your families and stuff, and how poor those people were. And I mean, I get it, man. Some of them did bad things to people. It's not like we don't either, you know what I mean? I'm not saying what they did was right by any means either, but it's like, I mean, if I had to feed my families too, I'd probably go to the extremes to keep them alive as well. It doesn't excuse what they did to the people that didn't survive, even if it was just neglecting them for that long. But I always try to look at both sides. Even today, I try to do that.